Hello and welcome everyone. We are gathered here today for a look ahead to the future of agriculture. My name is Hila and I am Head of Research at Vertical Field and a member at the Advisory Research Committee for Food Security at Ben-Gurion University. Food security is the challenge of sustainable food for the human population, while controlling greenhouse gas emissions and preserving food and water availability. Therefore, the scientific innovation and research dedicated to standing up to the food security challenge must cooperate in a multidisciplinary way through agriculture, water, ecology, and policy to optimize production in social justice and environmental vision. We have designed this session as a window of opportunity to exchange ideas and focus the wealth of experience and expertise each of you can provide on addressing the challenges for food today. There is much work to be done. So, what will agriculture look like at the century midpoint? Let's meet the expert. So please welcome Professor Oded Shoseyov, Session Chairman.
Thank you very much, Hila. Welcome everybody to the session. In a world with growing population, desert, and poverty, we do not have the privilege to continue doing the same things we have done so far. We do not have the privilege to dream big, not to dream big. Science and technology is the key, but it is only one part of the equation. We need policymakers and educators to come together. In this session, we invited key players to present their solutions. We will follow up with a panel discussion, and the first speaker is Ronen Randle. Ronen is a business development of Vertical Fields. Earlier in his career, he held senior positions at Intel Corporation in Israel and abroad, including treasurer of Intel Israel site and strategic investment manager at Intel Capital. Ronen graduated from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem with an MBA degree and holds a Master of Law degree from Bar Ilan University. Please, Ronen.
Thank you, Oded, for the warm welcome, and thanks for the organizers of this event for putting together such an interesting and professional conference. I have less than 10 minutes to talk to you about Vertical Field, so let me get straight to the point. You've heard this morning, and you will hear during this week about the many challenges that the planet has to confront, things like extreme weather, urban density, food insecurity, and population growth, mainly in urban areas. This world needs solutions that are high yield and client resilient. That's what the world needs, and that is exactly what Vertical Field is all about. The sector of indoor farming is creating a lot of buzz, a lot of interest, and also attracting significant investments. What you see here is a compounded annual growth rate of above 25%, showing you how this sector is expected to continue to grow in the next few years. We've also seen significant rounds of investments being closed in the last few years by leading corporates and investment firms. You see the names and the numbers of rounds that have been closed in the last 2-3 years, and this is expected to continue. So, as I said, Vertical Field, we are an ag-tech company that develops indoor farming solutions, mainly dedicated for the urban area. And let me tell you more about what our mission is and how we do our magic. So first of all, we're looking forward to a world of 2050 with more than 10 billion population. Those of you who read the news heard that the 8th million inhabitant of this planet joined us earlier this month. So we will be more than 10 billion people around 2050, with over 75% of them living in urban areas. This requires solutions so that this population will receive fresh and nutritious produce. At the same time, we need to look at resources that are becoming scarce. I'm talking about mainly land and water, which we are able to bring produce while using, I'll show the numbers in the next few slides. Yeah. So what are we focusing on, and what is really the essence of our magic at Vertical Field? First of all, if you had to put our value proposition into three main categories, it would have to be these. First of all, crop science, which is all about optimizing the growing protocols in an indoor environment. When I say indoor, I really mean anything that is indoor. Could be hangars, could be marine containers like the one that is parking outside. We're putting a lot of focus on data science, which is all about the sensors and algorithms that collect the knowledge and the data to make us a center of excellence for the world of indoor farming. And when I say flexible, what I really mean is that the structure is the less important element in our solution. Our technology, which consists of lighting systems, air control, precise irrigation, is something that we can implement, we can deploy in any closed environment. So these would be the three main elements of our value proposition. The solution today, which is mainly marine containers that were converted to growing platforms, can be either standalone, like the one that you can see just outside this conference, or in a structure, if you may, a hub or a farm of farms, like you see in the different designs here, which bring many advantages in terms of operations, financial advantages, and even agricultural advantages versus the standalone solution, which we do today and will continue to do. Let me talk about our unique advantages and what makes our solution special. The first point that I want to stress is the consistent supply year-round of produce. We control the weather in the indoor environment, so we're able to produce and provide the exact same crops and plants throughout the year. We are bringing much more automation into our deployments. Our solution is local. You can find us today in different retail stores here in Israel and in some locations abroad. When you open a farm like this at the store or just near it, it cannot get more local than that. The entire process is done without pesticides, without chemicals involved. We allow for daily harvesting from our farms. And as I mentioned to the gentleman sitting here, there is no supply chain. In fact, when you grow and you supply at the spot, you eliminate the carbon footprint involved in regular supply chains. And I mentioned before, a lot of IoT management and research-based solutions. At the end of the day, we bring a solution that also extends shelf life. I'll talk about that in one of the next slides. Our produce today is mainly consistent of herbs, leafy greens, and lettuces of different varieties. At the same time, we are putting most of our R&D effort into bringing the next generation of crops. We will introduce mushrooms and berries during 2023, which will be a significant leap forward for us at Vertical Field. And also a lot of emphasis on unique crops that can also generate higher revenue, but are unique and today are not possible or not available in most of the indoor farms, not the hydroponic and not others. And we adopted the solution that we call geoponic, which basically means that our plants grow on a plug, on a substrate, and we believe that gives us significant advantages. You see them listed here on the slide, so I won't read them to you. Maybe I would add to that it also provides us with a buffer, meaning that if hydroponic systems suffer from a glitch of electricity supply or water supply, the deterioration in the well-being of the plants is almost immediately. That's not the case when you are connected to a plug, which gives the additional shelf life. We do all of that while using just a fraction of the water compared to traditional farming. We generate a yield which is many, many times more than traditional farming, using way less land and causing less food waste. And let me share with you, before I leave, our last achievement was the opening of one of our farms in Vienna. So if any of you visit Austria, you're more than welcome to come and see us over there. I think, yeah. Just before I leave, just two things. I do encourage all of you to go visit the farm that we have outside. There will be a representative from our company to explain and answer your questions. And one more point. People asked me this morning if we won't become the enemies of the traditional farmers. And I want to tell you the answer is no. The traditional farmers are the first to acknowledge that this is the agriculture of the future. And when farmers today think about their children and grandchildren staying in the agriculture sector, they realize before most of us that it will look like this, not like their parents and grandparents grew. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any question? Yes, please.
I knew somebody would ask. One of the main challenges that the whole sector is confronting right now has to do with energy, and it's one of the things that must be dealt with. Energy consumption is still too high. It's gone down significantly simply by replacing components to less energy-consuming components inside the farms, but we still have a way to go. One of the reasons behind moving from a standalone solution to a cluster of farms is the fact that when you have a cluster, the energy efficiency of the whole solution is improved dramatically. You could also introduce renewable energy by covering farms with photovoltaic panels and even store some of the energy. So there's no way around it. The winners in this sector will be the ones who can deal with the energy issue and bring it down. We will. Well, we are based today on LED solutions, and that's probably the way it will be in the near future. And we continue to investigate any innovation in the lighting system, because if you take lighting, precise irrigation, and the air control, these are the three elements that we need to continue to get better all the time. Solutions that are not only good and provide higher yields, but consume less energy.
Thank you very much. So the next speaker is Mr. Shay Eliaz. Shay is a Deloitte leader of ESG strategy and transformation. For the last 16 years, Shay is a principal at Deloitte. Shay holds MBA in marketing from Baruch College in New York. Shay, please.
Thank you, Oded. And great presentation previously. Obviously, this is key to the future of agriculture. In my role, what I do is I deal with a lot of the corporations that are in the food system. And when I talk about the food system, I mean everything from inputs into the agricultural sector all the way to the consumer. And that's a lot of the global names that you would recognize that provide food to our global community. So frankly, the entire conversation that we could have could be just with this one slide. This is a slide that provides, in a simplified way, the history of food and agriculture. And it explains, in part, why we are at the situation that we're in today with a food system that is not exactly fit for purpose. Starting on the left-hand side, you could see sort of prior to 1900s, really a system that's focused all about farmer intuition and best practices. In the 1900s, beginning of the 1900s, beginning to move towards mechanization and the use of equipment as opposed to just individuals, people, and animals. In the 1950s, this is where everything really changed in food and agriculture, and that's where a lot of the R&D effort and the use of chemicals, both in terms of fertilizers as well as crop protection, occurred. And frankly, that's where we see the most significant rise in yields as a result of that. Many people know and have heard about the Green Revolution. As we shift towards the 2000s, this is where we start to see the information age of agriculture. And we look at, obviously, sequencing of genes. We look at microbiome research and precision agriculture. And as we look at the future, there's clearly some other things that need to be done. But really, this graph, what this graph really shows is that for the longest time, the efforts were focused on one thing and one thing alone, and that is reducing hunger. And the way to reduce hunger, the paradigm was always you need to produce more calories. Now, what happens when you focus on just producing more calories? The challenge is those calories are not always best for you in terms of consumption. They're also not always sustainably produced. So this focus on reducing hunger and on increasing yield has created some of the challenges that we're dealing with today. And even though it's a remarkable story when you think about reducing hunger, not that the job is finished, it has created some of the issues that we're dealing with today. In terms of what that looks like, here's a picture. In terms of the environment, obviously it has a significant impact on greenhouse gases and greenhouse gas emissions. And it is estimated that when you consider the food system as a whole, which includes both the agricultural production as well as post-harvest production and transportation and getting it to the consumers, we're dealing with roughly a third of greenhouse gas emissions globally. Desertification, we spoke about. That number obviously needs to change based on this morning's discussion to 47%. And much of the agricultural lands are taking place instead of where there were previously forests, and obviously this has a massive impact to biodiversity. On the right-hand side, you see that this also came at a cost to human health. Frankly, most of the reasons why people go to hospital these days and why people die is a direct result of what we eat. And frankly, when you look at the situation that we're in, where roughly 2 billion people are obese and 2 billion people are malnourished, that's a unique situation that has never previously existed. So despite our best efforts at reducing hunger, it has created significant health issues, and it has created some significant issues for the planet itself. And as you think about just the modern agricultural practices as a whole, it clearly creates a ton of issues. We spoke previously in the previous session about bringing food locally, and that's a big way to solve the issue. when you think about the global supply chain. I grew at an age where I knew that I can eat certain types of foods only in certain types of seasons, and frankly, my kids live in the US knowing that they could eat anything that they want at any part of the year. And that clearly is a result of that. The changes in land use, as well as heavy usage of inputs in agriculture, created a lot of issues as well. And when you consider that agriculture consumes so much water, this is yet another one of those issues that affects the environment. What I'm showing here is really the key levers that can change that. So if you think about the food system as it is today, there's really 3 levers that can actually optimize what we do today. One of them is change the way we produce food. And in doing this, you can actually solve a ton of the issues associated with both greenhouse gases as well as all the other impacts on natural resources of the environment as well as biodiversity. This alone, though, won't do it. And what you need to do is also reduce food loss and waste, which by all accounts can be anywhere between 30 to 40% of what we produce post-harvest. And imagine just that figure. It means that basically everything that we produce, roughly 30 to 40% of it ends up in the garbage. And if you were a business and I told you that 30 to 40% of what you produce will be thrown out, you would tell me that it doesn't make sense to set up a business like that, and yet this is what we do every day in the food system. So change the way you produce, but also make sure that what you produce is not lost and wasted. And then the third piece is around changing demand. And this is by far the hardest one to change. And frankly, this is the area where we need to focus on most. I know that these numbers might look a little bit different than the previous presentation, but frankly, what we see is a massive increase in investments in this kind of agriculture, in part because it does solve a lot of the issues that exist in the food system. And you could see some of the differentiation points associated with this type of agriculture and why it is so important to incorporate as a way to think about, and at least in my point of view, not completely changing over the way we do agriculture today, but supplementing the way we do agriculture today. And the more we move to this kind of model and do it at scale, I think the more that it solves some of the challenges that we have to date. Considering that we are almost at time, I won't go into the next few slides that show some of these examples of how we solve it along these different levers. But frankly, this is where a controlled environment can actually come and help address some of these challenges. So with that, I'll pause here and see if there are any questions.
Okay, you mentioned that part of the problems we have in agriculture is because we focus on solving hunger alone. What I'm asking is, are there technologies that improve the quality of the food instead of just the quantity of the food?
Yeah, so that is a big part of what is changing today. So even if you were to ask most people 10 years ago, when you think about the food system, what problem is it solving? The equation was always more calories. Today, when you ask people what problem is the food system trying to solve, there is more calories because the population is still growing, but at the same time, more nutritious and healthy foods, and that's better quality, as well as sustainably produced. And more we're hearing that there's an interest in also thinking about the communities where the food is grown. So from a very simple equation of produce more calories, Now it's produce more calories, but healthier and better calories, more sustainably produced, and to take care of the communities where that food is produced. Not simple, but that's what we need to solve for today. Yes?
Questions. Community-based composting seems to be a growing thing in Jerusalem, at least, and elsewhere. And I think that's a big contribution to indoor agriculture, community-based agriculture. And the second question I have is calories. What is being done to eliminate sugar as part of the equation? Sugar is poison from the standpoint of most of us talking about nutrition.
Yeah, so I guess one comment and one question. One comment was around composting and doing it on a community basis, and giving the example of Jerusalem, and that is certainly something that, not just in Jerusalem, it's being adopted globally. And just this past month, I was in Southeast Asia, I was in India, I was in Mexico. In all three regions, there are clear examples of where composting can be used as a community-based activity and to solve a broader issue. So absolutely an important piece in the puzzle. And with regards to sugar and elimination of sugar, which was the second question of how do we address that, by I think a conservative number in the US is that we are spending about $100 billion a year just on diabetes. And for the most part, that is something that can be addressed and can be addressed through basically changing our diets. And that's why I said previously it's an important lever. And frankly, it's also one of the most challenging levers to change because it's changing human behavior. As I think about the food system, to me, unlike many other challenges, this is not an engineering problem to solve. It's not a technology problem to solve. It's a change management issue more than anything else. It's about changing how we consume food. It's about changing how we think about what agriculture stands for and is done. And it's about changing even how we think about what we put in the fridge and how we eat. So all of those elements need to be done together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are many more questions, but we will have a panel. There will be another opportunity. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Professor Alon Wolf. Professor Wolf is head of biorobotics and biomechanics lab in the Technion. Alon got his BA, Master, and PhD in mechanical engineering at the Technion in Israel. Had guest appointments over the years at University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon. And he received many awards, including the 2006 Best Paper Award, Biorobotics, from the International Conference on Biorobotics and Bioelectronics. And I think that from my point of view, I think that the most amazing thing that I remember is that when Obama visited Israel, they decided that you will be the one scientist to present your discoveries. So please, Alon.
Thank you, Oded. Thank you. Until they open the presentation, one comment is I completely agree with the previous speaker, and I think the word that was missing is education, of course. Education the people and everything we need to start as early as possible, because if you read the book by Robert Fulghum, everything we had to learn, we already learned in kindergarten. So we need to start in kindergarten, educating people, and it's all about education. So as Oded introduced me, I'm an engineer in training, so I'll talk more about the technology that I see with respect to this field. I come from the medical field, human health, actually, biomechanics, robotics. And there are many challenges that we are confronted with nowadays regarding to the future. And they bring sparks and trends. Some trends are here to stay, and I'm here to talk about those sparks and maybe trends and challenges. And the future of agriculture, the A4, or Agriculture 4 Revolution, for those of you who know the term I4, Industry 4, which is very popular now in Europe, the fourth industrial revolution. So yes, we are at the end of the fourth industrial revolution. Many said that we are at the beginning of the fifth industrial revolution already. The first one with the steam power. The second one is with the assembly lines by Henry Ford and Heinz. Actually, it started with Heinz in food. Actually, assembly lines started with food technology. Not many knows about this in Pittsburgh. Mayo and ketchup, and then Kellogg's. It started with food. Many think it's by Henry Ford. Then automation, and then based on cyber physical system. I5, the industry fifth, is about cognitive system, cyber, physical, and cognitive, meaning that the human being is part of the process itself. The reason we are in this continuing revolution is because we are in a focal time or in a singular time in humankind timeline where so many technologies matured in one time, in a very limited time. And we're talking about communication and deep learning and low-price sensors and natural language processing. All these matured in almost the same time and had a very, very big impact on us. Very, very big impact on the world, on humanity, and as I say, also I dare to say on the world. And I distinguish between humanity and the world. From my point of view, the world was here before us and will be here after us. It's all about humanities. It's about us. You know, are we here to stay or not? So taking all this technology, the impact is really, really profound. Just to give you a notion how fast this technology is, and everyone knows this exponential graph. Everyone talks about this. Also, when we had the pandemic, every day we saw in the news those exponential graphs. So 30 years ago, 1 million things were connected in the world. Connected, talking to each other. Now, 50 and more. 50 billion and more. And see how much connectivity there is around the world. Yes, it also talks, we can talk about energy consumption because that's maybe the number one reason that pollutes us to death. We think that this revolution is green revolution. It's not green. If you go to ask Dr. Google, just write CO2e, carbon footprint, but electronic, every email we sent is about 4 grams. If we attach a picture or something, it's about 40 grams. So yes, there is also the energy thing that we need to consider. But what this revolution made is that everything becomes smart. Smart logistics, smart buildings, smart products, smart mobility, smart grids. Everything is smart around us. And yes, many claim that this is the most transformational time in human history. This was mentioned by one of the previous speakers. This is one of those challenges that we are confronting, is the exponential growth in population around the world. You know, we're exploding. We're about, as was mentioned before, to cross the 10 billion in a couple of years. However, another challenge that was not mentioned here is that, yes, population is growing, but is also aging. And this is a major concern. Actually, when I heard the previous speaker, I thought about, food. We need to think about food for older people rather than younger people, because we are going to cross the point where there are going to be more 65 and above than 65 and under in the world in 2050, some of those predictions. So population is also aging a lot. See, look what happens in Korea, and in China, in Japan. You see all the graphs, less children, more people getting older. And I think this picture or this slide gives the whole point. If in 1990, for every one retired person, we had about 6, the ratio was 1 to 6, people supporting him, the economy, in 2025, the ratio is going to be 2 to 1. And that brings a lot of challenges to the world, to the industry, to production lines, and to our economy. If in the past this was a classical structure of society, like a pyramid, age is here, sex is here, then in some countries, what we start to experience now, this is the United States. The pyramid is disappearing. Okay, of course it will have a large impact on labor and financial and social and labor. I mean, you know, those who produce food and other technology that we are consuming. Look what is happening already in Japan. And in Japan, in 2055, the pyramid is going to be reversed, flipped. So we need to take this also into account when we talk about the future of humanity. As I mentioned before, many of those processes are exponential, very fast. We thought that we are on a linear graph where we find ourselves somewhere else, which means that we need to respond and respond fast. As Charles Darwin said, that is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to changes, those who are fast enough to respond. So with that respect, humanity is responding pretty fast. We are introducing technology, as was mentioned before by the previous speakers. We have robotics technology, all integrated in many aspects of our life nowadays, and also in agriculture. Why? Because this is the most cyber-physical system, part of the Industry 4 revolution. So we're going to see more and more robotic technology integrated in our life. And if you want to see the future or the present, these are kind of robots that you are expected to see running around you in the very, very, very near future. These are robots by Boston Dynamics. And if you don't believe Boston Dynamics, you may believe Bill Gates, who said that robots in every home is the next big revolution. And you see more humanoid robots and integrated in our life. Cobots, robots that work together, collaborative robots that work hand in hand with humans, helping them produce things. With respect to agriculture, again, Shay, I think, mentioned it, and thank you for giving me the, you already showed the numbers. So again, the same graph talking about the change that happened in agriculture when technology was introduced. This is the percentage of humanity that were dealing with food or with agriculture with time. Look what is happening now in 2012, actually 10 years ago, and I'm guessing that the graph is maybe starting to plateau here, but we're talking here about 1%, 2%, 3% in the world. And this is thanks to technology, where you see drones and other technology working in our fields, robotic technologies. Another challenge and trend that is worth mentioning is, and was mentioned again before me by one of the speakers, is the trends of megacities. The fact that we are clustering around megacities, and I don't remember the number that the previous speaker said, something like 75% by 2050, something like this, in megacities. Which brings, again, a technological challenge, and now the buzzword, and if you go to New York City, the mayor of New York and the previous mayor in New York invested billions of dollars in investigating urban tech. And part of urban tech, of course, is food. It's enough to wake up in the morning, early in the morning in New York, and see how many trucks are coming into the city to bring food to the city, to the people who live in the city. It causes a major challenge, both polluting the air and traffic, etc. So urban tech, smart cities, and if we're talking about smart cities, I remember Hollywood scenes where you see fly over a city, you see a lot of roofs. The next, maybe in a couple of years, you're going to see this kind of picture. Why not using those roofs as places where we grow food? You know, in Tel Aviv, it's already being done, and this is part of the urban tech, smart city, and smart urban farming revolution that we are experiencing. And the future of indoor agriculture is vertical farms run by robots, as was mentioned, by vertical field, growing the food as close as possible to the customer, to the consumer, and not by not human involved, because we don't have people enough to work, by robots that are going to control everything. Roof gardening robots, and this is a project I was involved in developing roof gardening robotic systems, cable-driven, like those flying cameras over soccer fields and sports fields that actually do the gardening automatically, so you don't even have to go up to the roof to do things. Everything is done automatically for you. And as was mentioned before, data, information, collecting information. Data is the new oil. So we're producing a lot of data, by the way. This is per minute. It's huge. What do you do with the data? Of course, you do some machine learning, deep learning, and digital twin. I think this is the newest trend in food technology, introducing the digital twin concept. Digital twin is something we already experience in industry. Most of the things that we consume, for sure the cars and aircraft technology, has been produced using the digital twin technology. Digital twin means that you have a model, a computer model, very accurate model of a physical thing, okay? So a car industry, car manufacturer has a very accurate model of its current car in the computer because the current car is collecting information for him. Our cars are wired with sensors, and if you drive and often see a message by your car is now connected to a local server or its local provider. It's not because you're getting service, it's because they're downloading data that you collected for them to improve their digital twin, to improve their models. By the way, I think that the Dreamliner is producing 1 terabyte of data every flight. This data has to be stored somewhere, and then Boeing is doing some digital twin, as I said, in aircraft industry, in the auto industry, and, believe it or not, also already in farming. So digital fields, digital plants, don't be surprised. Personal medicine is already doing that. Health companies already creating digital twin of patients so that they can actually simulate therapeutics and processes on a computer model and then downloaded or implemented in humans. All kind of sensors that are now being developed for this revolution of creating digital agriculture. So everything will be simulated and then optimized in the computer because computer can do things very fast. You don't have to wait 20 days to see if your experiment was successful or not. You can run it overnight or over an hour and get the result and optimize the way you produce food. And the first Sparks is already here. This is Siemens, one of the world leader in industry development tools, or in digital twin also. The other one is PTC and others. They already launched the farmer in the cloud, already implementing the idea of digital twin with a farmer in the cloud where you grow, you collect data, and you optimize the process on the fly. So with that, with the farmer in the cloud, I want to thank you and open for questions.
Thank you very much. Question?
So many.
Either I was too futuristic or too obvious.
No, you're great. So obviously, I have a question for you. So where do you see, or when do you see autonomous robots, vehicles coming into real agriculture?
Real agriculture? I'll give you an answer that I take from the medical field. There is a psychological barrier and that you have to cross because those technologies that are developed so fast, they leave many people out of jobs today. Many people lose their jobs because technology is taking over. And also in agriculture, there is a psychological barrier. The technology is already here. I think that, with couple of years, you could already see robots running in the fields and harvesting and plowing and doing all that. Actually, even today, the combines are almost robots. The driver is just sitting there, just almost like in a Tesla, but everything is done automatically with GPS technology, so you're really in straight lines, you're optimizing everything. It's already here, we don't call it robotics. because it's kind of a psychological barrier that we have to cross, but it's here, and it's inevitable that it will just exponentially explode at some point. We're going to see more and more.
Thank you very much. So the next speaker is Dr. Kinneret Shefer. Kinneret is the founder and CEO of Geneer. She received her PhD from the Hebrew University and was a postdoc at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She is an amazing young scientist with exceptional understanding in RNA regulation of one of the most challenging and promising fields in biology. Kinneret, please.
So thank you for coming and for organizing the conference. And today I would like to show you how new technologies at the field of gene engineering can be part of the solution for the reduce in food security. So Geneer developed a technology and aim the technology to boost food security and sustainability by activating plant traits on demand. So basically the technology is simple. We develop the ability to control when and for how intense plant trait will be expressed. So what we are developing is basically a lock, which is a non-coding sequence that we can introduce to any target gene in the plant. And then when there is some kind of a reason to activate this gene, the growers can apply an inducer that penetrate the cell, alter the structure, and allow the expression of this trait for a limited time, for a week or two. Then you can ask yourself, why do we need to control plant traits? Because today it's quite easy to introduce new genes to the plant, introduce new traits to the plant, and just let them act. But some of the traits, especially when it comes to abiotic stress, such as drought tolerance traits, put a lot of havoc on the plant and disrupt the physiology if they're not being controlled. And basically what we are doing today is adding a new dimension, which is timely activation of traits. And I want to give you an example. We are not a gene discovery company, and the genes that are that can help the plant to face with drought tolerance genes are already known. Some of them are even embedded within the plant. Simply, the plant did not evolve fast enough to handle the rapid global warming. And therefore, smart activation is required. And I want to give you an example. There is a gene that's called LOS5. It's a wonderful gene that closes the stomata, the little holes on the plant leaves. And by closing the stomata, it prevents evaporation and increase drought tolerance by 20%. You will think that it's a great gene to introduce to the plant. But the problem is that when you close the stomata, you also disrupt CO2 flow into the plant, and therefore you disrupt photosynthesis. So the plant might be more resilient to drought, but it will also be smaller. And you will end up with reduced yield, and that's not going to help increasing food security. So imagine that we are developing something that is a little bit like the Iron Dome, which basically means under normal grow condition, the plant will not waste any energy and will not be in stress and just grow normally. But if some kind of a stress event happens, then we give a tool for the growers to activate those traits on demand when and where it requires, and allow for this Iron Dome shield, for this shield, to turn on for a limited time, and when the hazard is off, the plant can go back and to grow normally. And you can do it more than once, every time you need a protection. So basically, we are developing the Ag Iron Dome. I will say that we are we wanted to prove that we can control plant trait. In order to do that, we chose two applications that are very visualized. You can visualize them very easily. For example, drought tolerance and plant size. Herbicide tolerance and plant size. Those are those plants on my left, your right, are 100% identical. They have herbicide tolerance traits locked. Therefore, when you apply the herbicide without unlocking the trait, the plants simply die from the herbicide. But if you unlock the trait by applying our inducer, and then you administrate the herbicide, then the plants become tolerant, resistant, because you activate the traits and you allow the plant to be protected. With the other example is plant size. Again, those plants are 100% identical genetically, but there is some trait that related to size that is locked using our locker. And when you unleash it, you can increase the size 3 times. So those are examples to show that we can control plant traits. And actually what we are developing is a library of locks and keys, because each trait need a specific pattern of activation. And because we're talking about unique RNA structure-based gene engineering, we can adjust the pattern to the application. So as I said, basically, if you understood correctly, this is a platform. We can apply our technology to any gene in almost any organism. But we are focusing on increasing food security. And in order to do that, we are focusing on 2 main applications. One is drought tolerance, allowing activation of drought tolerance trait, and the other is improving the gene editing processing and enhancing crops. So as I said, drought tolerance put a lot of havoc on the plant metabolic, but also drought is a very complicated trait. What will be drought for tomato will not be drought for sugarcane. And also drought varies from crop to crop and place to place. So we're talking about a very complicated trait. And therefore, a smart activation like Gineers is required to allow a real drought tolerance plant. The other application that we are focusing is gene editing. So today you can introduce small, very point changes in the genome that will allow enhancement of the crops. The crops might be more tolerant to drought or more resilient to viruses, etc., by simply introducing small mutation using some CRISPR-Cas that that's one example of gene editing machinery. So today, this is very much the front of the research in crops, making small changes and enhancing the crop, and gene editing by itself is not considered GMO in the United States, Canada, and other, because we're talking about small changes. But the problem is that you introduce a whole machinery into the genome, which is called the CRISPR-Cas, and you need to extract it, control it, and extract it. If you don't control it, you might get off-target gene editing of genes that you didn't mean to edit, or you can get, and you need to extract the machinery once it finished to do the editing. So using our technology today to extract and to take the gene editing out, you need to undergo and invest a lot of energy in crops like soy, and in soy crops you cannot even do any gene editing such as sweet potatoes, because you cannot get rid of the gene editing machinery. Using Gineer technology, we want to silence and active elements in the cells that will allow us to extract and control the gene editing process. And by doing that, we want to increase the efficiency of the gene editing process, but also significantly reduce the time to reach to the enhanced product. So that's another application that we are currently focusing on. As I mentioned, our technology is a platform, and we have several verticals in which we are applying our technologies. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Any question from the audience? Yes, please.
I just wanted to know if the logs that you were speaking about, are they crop specific, or are they very generic that you apply to all the crops? Are they trait specific?
It's a good question. So it's not crop specific, but it is trait specific, because different traits require different pattern of activation. So some traits and some application you will want to have, for example, zero background expression. Other application you will want to have a very big delta of activation, or very small. So the pattern of expression can be engineered. And we are adjusting our system to the traits, but it can be relevant for different crops. So we can take those keys and lock and pass them from soy to sweet potatoes, etc.
Are you able to activate more than one gene at the same time?
I always get that question. Can I control more than one gene? Usually, well, actually, we can, because it depends on what gene you want to control. Sometimes you can control an activator that will be silenced, and in a specific time will activate different genes that are under the activation of that gene. So it's all about deciding who you want to control. You can control a silencer, you can control an activator, you can control a transcriptor factor. So you can either control the gene directly, but you can also control it by controlling other activators and elements in the cell. And by activating, for example, activator, you can activate several genes under the control of this activator. Hi, Mickey.
Hey.
Kinneret, זה בסדר.
Sorry. It means that in order to trigger, deactivate, you need to enter the field and give a foliar spray or something?
To deactivate, it's simply the inducer simply gradually extract out of the cell, and the activation goes down. Yeah, you have to spray it either by air spray or tractor spray. Those are tools that are very familiar for the growers. You need to take action, yes. You need to take action. If you want to protect your crops, you usually, today the ability to predict the weather is very, very efficient. So you have a tool that we give you to go and protect your field. But you need to go and do that, yes.
Thank you very much. So the next speaker is Dr. Dror Shalitin. Dror is the founder of and CEO of Plant Arc Bio. Dror received his PhD in plant molecular biology at the Hebrew University and did his postdoctoral studies at the University of California, Los Angeles. He then became a senior scientist at Evogene before he established Plant Arc Bio. And I have a confession. Years ago, when Dror approached me, came to my office and told me about his brilliant idea for Plant Arc, I told him that it's not going to work. And today I'm happy to say that I was so wrong. It does work indeed. Please, Dror. And it's also a lesson for all of us. listen to young scientists. They're smarter.
Thank you very much, Oded. So hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this wonderful conference. PlantArc Bio was established in 2014. We are currently, for 2 years, a public company. So this is a disclaimer. I'm passing the two first slides. What we do in PlantArc is actually two main directions of development. The first one is working towards applications of using RNA to increase yield and to control pests. So this is a kind of a very novel, probably revolutionized idea to be involved in the production of increasing crops, but also for a biological solution to control pests, mainly currently insects. So again, that's the disclaimer. So we have, as I said, two directions in PlantArc Bio. One is using RNAi to increase yield and control pests. The other one that I'm going to discuss today is a platform actually that we developed in PlantArc that is, we use it for gene discovery for different traits. And I'll show you how it's related to this discussion on the desertification. So again, the needs and the challenges today are very clear. I think people before me mentioned them already. So the arable land is reducing as related to the increase in population. The climate is changing, and there is much challenge to deal with food insecurity. To give you an example, in 2012, 10 years ago, there was a dramatic drought in the main region of agricultural growth, not only in the United States, in the Corn Belt, but also in other places of the world. It reached a damage of around $40 billion that year alone. The year afterwards, there was an increase, dramatic increase in the prices of everything. Seeds, meat, everything consumed by agriculture. So today, if we're looking at how are people, companies trying to look for ways to make the genetic of the plants better to deal with all these problems. So the main use today is by data, is to use big data by computational tools to try to make sense in this big data and find genetic elements to improve crops. In PlantArc Bio, we are doing something different. We developed a platform that we call it DIP, which stands for Direct in Plant, where we can practically test millions of genes that come from any source in nature for improving a given trait. So how does it work? Actually, the example I'll give you today is regarding drought. For drought, the obvious place to go and look for genes for drought is the desert, like here. We went to the desert for near the Dead Sea area, the Judean desert. We collected samples mainly from soils in the desert, brought them to our lab, and prepared actually huge amount of gene pools that came from the desert. And we transformed all these genes directly into to Arabidopsis model plants, and started testing them whether we can see a phenotype of drought resistant. So some examples of genes that we discovered, if we compare them to the best known gene that was available in agriculture by Monsanto, the drought guard gene, or to a gene we took from the literature, we see that some of our genes that we found in the desert are doing much better to control drought in these model plants. When we went to another model plant to test further these genes that we found, we saw that several of our genes are doing great. Not only they are drought resistant, but they are also increasing biomass of the plants pretty dramatically. And here is an example of one of the genes and a result of shoot biomass when we grew them, these tobacco plants in the field under drought. So you see a huge increase in biomass compared to controls. What about crops? What about non-model plants? So some of the genes we continued working on, we transformed them to soybean, one of the biggest crop in the world. And we did a field trial in the US. It was just finalized last year. And you can see that some of our genes are really increasing pretty dramatically the yield, seed yield, under drought conditions. So if we did the experiment in Illinois, this year was quite wet, actually, last year. So the difference between irrigated and non-irrigated was about 10%, as you can see in the control on the left. But some of our genes did very well for both conditions, not only drought, but also in normal irrigated conditions. They increase yield by up to 16%, which is quite dramatically. We are in the middle of collaboration with a great seed company from India. They are called Rolis. And we gave them several of our genes that came, again, from around the Dead Sea, from the soils around the Dead Sea, from microorganisms. And they introduced them to corn, so they did transgenic corn. And you see that some of the genes are doing pretty well under higher osmotic stress, as you can see here, but there are also, some of them are also making larger plants, like we saw in the tobacco. And if you test in pots, how are these genes doing under drought? So you can see that some of the genes, and here are 3 examples, that are really drought tolerant. You can see that after severe drought, if you irrigate them, some of them are like resurrecting completely and doing much better under drought. And they already started some tests of these corn in the ground. And you can see here when they gave them drought conditions, so the relative water content was much lower if you compare the irrigated to non-irrigated plants using our genes. As you can see here, pretty dramatically. They also made much more pollen, which is an indicator that they're doing better under these drought conditions. But the most interesting thing, I think, is this picture that shows that the dry shoot of the plants, of the corn plants that were grown in the soil in this net house experiments, were doing much better than the controls. You see that some genes are 40% better, 75%, and even almost 4 times doing more dry material under drought conditions than the controls. And this is the last slide I'm showing, that we're working on other traits as well, not only drought. This is an example for nitrogen use efficiency using the DIP technology that we are using for gene discovery. And you can see that one of our leading genes is doing much better under very low amounts of nitrogen compared to control plants that are, as you can see here, under severe stress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dror. Any question from the audience? Yes, please.
Genes from microbial origin or they're from plant origin?
These genes that I'm showing here are from microorganisms that are taken from the soils in the desert that probably became so drought and probably also saline resistant because of they're used to grow there, so evolution made them controlling better these dramatic situations. Yes, Kinneret.
Whether you also observe increase in the mass of the actual season.
The answer, the question is whether, if I understood correctly, the corn or the seed amount is increasing also, not only the size of the plants. The honest answer that I don't know yet. This is really new results, and the experiments didn't finalize yet, so I don't see here in the corn at least the results for the seeds or the combs weight.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next speaker, actually the last speaker of the session before the panel, is Professor Menachem Moshelion. Menachem is from the Institute of Plant Science and Genetics at the Faculty of Agriculture of the Hebrew University. His research focused on mechanisms controlling water use efficiency and productivity under normal and abiotic stress. Professor Moshelion, in my view, is one of the most proliferating scientists in the field of modern agriculture, and I look forward to listen to him today.
Thank you very much, Oded. So, hello everyone. So my name is Menachem Moshelion. I'm a plant physiologist. Today I want to talk to you about something that in my lab we don't do as much as other crops, but I think is very important for the future. And this is the future of optimizing growth under controlled chambers. Okay? So what we have here in the desert, we don't have enough water, but we have a lot of energy. Okay? And when you have energy, basically you can grow everything. And I want today to talk to you about some principle of the plant-environment interaction that in the end, these are the keys for any successful growth, in particular under controlled growth environments. So, when you look in the Oxford Dictionary about the word plant, right, we all know it. It's a plant, right? It's the living organism. But it's also a factory. Sorry? It's okay. So plant is both a plant and a factory. And this is very nice. I like this word very much because we use plants as factories, right? So in a normal factory, what we have is the input of raw material and energy, and we have some product. In plants, we actually have the same. We have the raw entry of water, CO2, nutrient, and light. It doesn't have to be the sun. And of course, we have all the food, feed, fiber, and other stuff we use. So when you talk about growth chambers and agricultures, basically we use the same idea. We actually using light, water, CO2, and the photosynthesis mechanism give us sugars, okay? So photosynthetic basically give us just sugars, but if you also provide it with minerals, computer is very slow, sorry. So if you also provide this with minerals, you have everything you need, right? Metabolites. This is actually our food. So using artificial environment, it's very easy to provide those. And the main problem we are facing is the huge complexity between plant and environment, right? Plant and environment are always interacting. Plant respond to the environment every minute. Plant sense all the conditions, light, temperature, humidity, CO2 levels, water levels, nutrient levels, and respond by either being more productive, this is what we want, or being more survivable, this is what we usually don't want. So of course, if you control all these conditions, basically you can control your yield. Today I want to give you an example with something that we don't use as food, but as maybe fun, which is cannabis. It's a very important industry. And I want to show you how we control the environment in compared to external environment, and why data is so important to control this complexity of plant environment introduction. I'm going to show you how we collect the data and what we are doing with it. So we use two environments, one of BOL, pharmaceutical, they grow cannabis in a pharmaceutical way. So we use their greenhouse and also our control chambers where we control everything. So we use a plant dietetic system, which basically both collect the data, the physiological data, like, you know, like the smart Apple Watch, only we do it to plants, and also stress the plants. So our system enables us from one end to control the irrigation, fertigation of each plant separately. This is very important because you have the spatial and temporal impact, but also to measure the feedback of key physiological traits, which are basically transpiration, stomatal conductance, water use efficiency. So we could bring a randomized structure. We measure the soil, plant, and atmosphere with many, many traits simultaneously and continuously. So the idea that in the end we can collect all the data and analyze what is the most effective part that's really impacting the yield, right? So the objective goal here is the yield. So the system enabled to control each plant and to take many physiological parameters. I'm not going to take you through these physiological parameters here. I just want to show you a small example what is the outcome. So this is one graph showing you in blue the transpiration, how much water the plant loses per day. You see very nice linear growth, okay, because the plant have more and more leaves, so more and more transpiration. You can actually see the number of leaf, okay? You can see it growing nice with the transpiration. But here at this point, you don't see more increase in transpiration. You have like a block of transpiration because there are not more leaf, but the green line gives you the plant biomass. So how come the plant keep growing but the transpiration is fixed? This is the vegetative part. So this is when the plant going from the vegetative part to the reproductive part. So this is basically flowers and fruit. This is a usual cycle of a plant, and usually this is the most important part of the plant. I mean, how much food it produces us. So you can say that the linear part is actually going to determine this biomass part, because when the plant produces leaf, this is where the yield is going to produce. Okay? So if we can control the growth condition this part, we can control the conditions at this part. So what we did here, we check a very common knowledge of a cannabis grower that if you put drought, the plant actually responds by increasing the metabolite, like in grape wine, if you will. You know, stress improves the metabolite. Many people think this is the same in cannabis. I'm going to prove you it's wrong. totally wrong. So we control the drought in a very steady rate. This system that I show you can enable you to control each plant transpiration in a very precise way. So when we say drought, we know it's the exact same drought, regardless of the plant location or amount of transpiration. So each plant is exposed to the same factor. This is called standardized drought. When you do drought, you must keep in mind the plant have to sense not just the same atmosphere, but also the same water conditions. So you can see how nice we can control this. I'm just going to skip this. This is what the drought do to the plant. I just want you to notice this. This is stomatal conductance. And you see when the environment is not stable, also the stomatal conductance, look how fast stomatal conductance respond. This is a key trait. Stomata respond to many of the environment in minutes. So if your conditions are not perfect, you're going to have a penalty on yield in matter of minutes. So if you sum up these reductions, you're actually going to have the losses. So if, in the end, when you measure this part of stomatal closure, this is when the plant is not active. So first of all, we check the drought on the flower yield. You can see a very linear reduction of flowers. This is actually the weight of the flowers. You can see we reach very nice level. So the growths are perfect. We can get up to 180 grams per plant. It's a very nice amount. You can see a very nice correlation between the flowers rate and the amount of the plant transpiring. So as I told you before, when stomata is closed, the plant do not lose water, but also do not gain CO2. And this has a direct impact on the yield. You see the red one is the stress, the blue one is the well irrigated. Then we work with Professor Dedi Meiri from the Technion. He's an expert in cannabis, phytocannabinoids, and he actually knows to extract 111 phytocannabinoids and 132 terpenes. So we checked each and every one of those in response to the different drought levels. And this is type of plant called MVA. You can see here a very nice response of the major cannabinoid reduction. You see this is well irrigated, it's green. As more red, it means the plant has lower amount of concentration. This is average of 3 independent experiments. And if you want to see the major cannabinoids, like the THC, you can see we can reach up to 30%. It's very high quality, it's very high amount. And this is only under very well irrigation, only when you irrigate the plant exactly how much you need, and you keep the stomata open all the time. As I told you, we can actually feedback irrigate, so we can actually keep the stomata open all the time. Only when you have it, you can reach actually the maximum concentration. Even the slightest drought, you can start slope in the reduction of the metabolites. You can see the same thing with the CBD. Some cannabinoids working the opposite, but these are stress-related cannabinoids, and of course not the important ones. We did the same with other cultivars called ODEM. These are two of the most important, I don't know if the most important, but important BOL cannabinoids. You basically see the same pictures. Here there are few that respond differently, but all in all, you pretty much get the same picture, very high concentration that goes down with stress. I know I need to hurry. Let's look on the terpenes. Terpenes showing you the same thing in the MVA. You see reduction, but terpene is what you smell. When you smell cannabis, this is what you smell. You don't smell the phytocannabinoids, you actually smell the terpenes. Terpenes in one line actually reduce, but in the other one, so this is showing you the average reduce, but in the other line, it's totally mixed. So in the ODEM, some goes up, some goes down. So terpenes behave totally different in response to drought in one cultivar versus the other, which means that the main cannabinoids clearly goes down. We have many repetitions, but the terpenes that many people actually choose their flower based on the smell, these are changing, and maybe this is why it's become such a common practice. So if we're going back to my main question, the plant-environment interaction and how to collect the data, I think that using this kind of system, collecting all of this huge amount, we have millions of data points per week. And when we do image analysis, we don't do image analysis. When we do machine learning algorithms, we get a lot of data in the momentary response of the plant to the environment, temperature, humidity, CO2, light, and so on. And in the end, I think the big data that we are collecting, this is really the future because we can improve in a significant percentage. And when you have a control chamber, you don't need to take so much effort. You can really control it. So for me, for the future, this data is the main thing. Thank you very much. I just want to thank Itamar Shenar, my master student, and Professor Dedi Meir that did the biochemical analysis, and from BOL, Dvir Teller, the main agronomist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for one question. So I have a short question. I mean, the technology you presented is really amazing. How fast you think we can, or how easy can we introduce that system to the field? I mean, like real field.
So we already have, not far from here in Chatzeva, a real field system. And now we're going to have in the faculta, in our Chava, we're going to have a real field system. And so it's already there. Now, when you say a real field, it's real field environmental condition because you always have to work in some kind of artificial irrigation and pots. But we can very easily put it already in the field, just need to protect it from water, and this is relatively easy.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to invite all the speakers to sit with us for the panel. So thank you very much for joining us. And I would like to start with a question that I will address to each one of you. And the question I would like to ask you is, what are the regulatory gaps we need to solve to assure food supply to future generations? Dror, please.
Regulatory issues, I think, are the factors that really block us from getting these technologies faster to the farmers, to the market. You probably all very much know about the very severe regulation that GMO plants have, very similar to medicine and to other applications that we are working on. I think regulation in many countries have to figure out that we are in a changed world and to try to release the pressure on innovation much faster than what they're doing today. Otherwise, we'll be in a severe problem in the near future. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Shay. Maybe you can comment and maybe tell us a little bit about the new environment in the U.S. with respect to regulations of GMO, genome editing, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I absolutely agree. I think the regulatory environment, first of all, it's not uniform across the globe, and I think that that's creating a massive issue, especially for companies that operate across borders, because it's a hodgepodge of different regulations. So I do agree that coming up with a mechanism to look at certainly everything associated with gene editing in a much more constructive way, I think would be very, very useful. If I could, I'd love to add another area where I think government can actually be an important force for good, is in the true cost of food. So if you look at the way food costs today, there are certain plants and crops that are subsidized and others that are not. And it artificially impacts the way that food is priced across the globe. That is the reason that even in places like New York, where I live, we could still talk about food deserts, where it's easier to get a hamburger from McDonald's than it is to get a salad. And if we are talking about food security and we're talking about nutrition and health, and ultimately better, more sustainable food, I think addressing some of the challenges that we have today with how we think about costing and pricing food is going to be a major element as well.
Thank you, Kinneret. Same question.
Thank you, Oded. So I think that a change is required by the definition of the food. It should start from the public. The public should understand that what matters is whether the food is good for nutrition, whether it's safe for the environment, and also contribute to the fight in global warming and increased food security. And it's not necessarily how it's been generated, but what it actually contribute to the person and to the environment. And I do have to say that in Canada, for example, the regulation system investigated new crops based on their effect on the environment and their effect on the health of the person that will consume and the pets, etc., rather than on how it was generated, as opposed to other regulatory systems, such as the European systems, that doesn't bother too much to actually really go into the details of how the crops is actually performing, not how it's created. And in many aspects, it's contra to food security, because when you prevent enhancement of crops due to how it was generated rather to how it's actually performed, then you prevent, stop in a way, the progress of science. And you end up in reducing yield per land, and eventually you force the use of other lands and reduce the forest. And you, by eating food that was not maximized to use the land correctly, you actually contribute to global warming in the worst way, because you are not encouraging maximizing the natural resource. So you are forcing to increase use of other lands and reduce forest and increase the CO2 formation. So as Europe, from one hand, for example, leads the perspective of fighting global warming, from one hand, it's very strict on the other hand at the field of generating crops that are more performing better. And I think that you can already read news that it's being changed gradually with understanding that the parameter that needed to be considered are not how the crops generate, but how it performs.
Thank you, Kinneret. Ronen, please.
I think that whenever you are a leader or a pioneer in any technology, you should expect that regulations will be lagging behind. So that's a price that anybody who leads or is a pioneer should expect. And the people on this panel, the people in this room are all leaders and pioneers, so it comes as part of the game. You will have to confront regulation issues. I think we need to remember the job of the regulator really is to protect the interest of the public in large. It's not about making the lives of entrepreneurs and investors miserable. That's not the purpose. We need a lot of regulatory support to promote this vision of feeding the universe. If we want to do this in indoor environment, we need the whole process to be much lighter, much easier, much quicker, and without regulations and standardization, it will not happen. So I still think we have a way to go.
Thank you. Before, Alon, before you answer, I just want to respond to one of your comments that the role of the regulator is to protect the public. Unfortunately, I feel that many times they protect themselves or they're behind rather than the public, because there is no regulator that got a prize for allowing a breakthrough technology that did something good for the world, but there are many they paid with their job for making mistakes. So it's inherited in the system that they sometimes do not take actions, and I think that it's not just the regulator; it's also other stakeholders. But we'll talk about it later. Alon, please.
Well, I completely agree with the previous answers. In engineering, I'll call it the time constant, or from bench to bedside, or from bedside to bench, from the lab, the basic research, to the customer, to the product, or backwards. We need to get this much faster, improve the regulation in tech transfer. Many of the discovery starts in the university's lab because we have the privilege to dream and take risks. But then we need to have very fast mechanism to transfer the technology to the market, to the user. One more thing that I want to mention is, again, from regulation point of view, is how much food we waste. I don't know, there is a big campaign in Israel now about 30%, I was shocked to hear the number, I'm not sure it's right, 30%, even more, of the crop is left in the field or something, so I don't know, somehow we need to improve it with technology probably. Technology might be the answer here. And going back to urban tech, I think regulation about communities must grow their food. So if you live in a city, you have to be part of this ecosystem. It's an ecosystem. It's really a holistic approach. It's not just one. The solution is not in the hand of one thing or one person in the pipeline. It's a holistic approach. So community has to be part of it. We all have to take responsibility. It's easy to say someone else is the blame but I think we need to look in the mirror and say, can I consume less? What can I do in order to improve this, to be part of the process?
Thank you, Menachem.
Yeah, thank you. Totally agree with Alon. I mean, think about it. If you can save 30 or 40% just by preventing waste. Now, if we put numbers, by 2050, we need to double the food supply, right? Pretty much, if the same trend going to continue.
It's almost like the Red Queen effect. The Red Queen effect from second book of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, you have to run twice to stay in the same place.
Everyone is running the same, so you have to run always twice. You keep chasing your tail.
So personally, as a plant physiologist, I don't think we can really solve the problem via the plant. I mean, plant responds to drought always by closing stomata. And then they will survive but not produce. And this is a major issue. I mean, you check the last 50 years of the big breeding companies, they have like 5 what they call drought tolerance. And they invest millions in this, billions. It's a problem that will be very hard to solve. It's a multifactorial gene problem with multifactorial environment problem. And in the end, when plant closes stomata to protect itself, it doesn't produce. So to me, I think that we need to look for other ways like this waste that we produce and throw to the garbage. And also meat industry. Meat today uses about 50% of the soils, of the agricultural soils. You can go in Brazil for miles and miles, see only cows, where you can grow corn. Now, cows are mainly for proteins, right? We eat meat. I eat meat. I'm not vegetarian. I like meat. But we grow so much meat that it's come on the expense of our vegetables. Why don't we grow chickpea instead? Not the whole part. 20%. To grow 100 grams of protein with a cow, you need 185 square meters. To grow the same 100 grams of protein with chickpea, you need 3.5 meters. 50 times less to the same amount of protein. Think about what an easy solution we have just tomorrow, okay? So we are all trying, me too, to improve the plan, to understand it, but the solution is not there. I don't, it's personal think. So of course we need to improve. But first we need to rethink about how we use this earth, and I think this is like tomorrow's solution, not in 50 years solution.
So thank you, because you really bring me to the next question, which is, what are the cultural gaps we need to overcome to ensure food supply to the future generations? And Dror, maybe I'll start with you.
You're talking about cultural gaps?
It includes education.
Well, I'm not expert in culture, but I think the solutions. I think it's more and more obvious to the public that it should be something holistic. It's for the urban use. Probably vertical fields are a great solution. Probably they give solution to a certain part because it's great for vegetables and maybe small fruits, but again, it's not a solution for everything. They probably can't grow wheat yet to get a substantial amount of wheat in-house. So we need something holistic. We need solutions that will look at how do we pollute and try to reduce pollution. How do we make things better by addressing genetic solutions, and also by technical solutions like vertical farming, which is great for the cities. I mean, and I think everyone understands today that it's something that has to be coming from many directions and many solutions at the same time.
So maybe, Shay, before I ask you to respond to that, when I talk about cultural gaps, I really mean about the way we are raised and which affect the way we do things. I mean, in Israel, we have a great two examples where years ago people were cutting flowers, and despite the laws and the regulations, people continue to cut flowers in the field. But then they started a program actually in kindergarten, and then the children taught their parents this is not the way to go. I mean, we should not cut flowers in the field because they will be gone. And the same thing was with the belt, wearing a belt in cars. So I think it has to do with education. And I'd like to share with you a story, a short story that I was driving my car and I listened to the radio, and there was someone from Bar Ilan University who wrote a novel. And the novel, it's a future. It's a future time in Israel, 2050, where it's not allowed by law to slaughter an animal. Going back to what you said, and there is the grandfather that takes his child with him to an underground restaurant in Tel Aviv because he would like to, it's an illegal, of course. He wants her to taste real steak. From animal, because everything is cultured and protein alternatives. And his granddaughter gives a bite, looks at her grandpa and said, Grandpa, it really tastes good, but it's not like the real thing. So it really has to do with culture. So now, Shay, maybe you can comment on that, and what do you think we should do about it?
Yeah, so I think this is where we could bring maybe a few of these themes together. When I spoke before about the three levers, really the first one was production, and I think much of these talks were about production, but the other two were really about waste and food loss, as well as really changing the way we think about demand. And when I say demand, it's really the consumer and how we think about food and what we consume. To me, that again is probably the most important lever, but it's also the most difficult lever, exactly for the reasons that you described. It's cultural. So when we talk about reducing the consumption of meat as an example, because it is not a very efficient way to think about delivery of proteins, you're dealing now with cultural issues, you're dealing with taste, and those are going to be really, really hard to change. But inevitably, if you're trying to change the way we think about the food system in the future, that change has to come. And you know, I'm glad to say that we're beginning to see some of these changes. So when you look, certainly in the US, Canada, Europe, you do see food patterns changing. Again, they're changing in small increments, so it's very hard to see unless you actually zoom out and are able to monitor this. But I will tell you that as I think about the companies that I consult with and serve, many of them are seeing those changes. And because of those changes, they're now modifying their portfolios, they're modifying how they produce food. And that to me is a clear indication of things to come. It has to start with the consumer voting with their feet, basically saying, we're interested in another value proposition. And then the rest of the value chain basically reacts to that, all the way upstream to inputs into agriculture.
Thank you. Kinneret, a short comment on that?
Well, I'm a great believer in education, and that's probably because I'm a woman. And I think that everything starts from education, whether it's how we eat, what we eat, and how we relate to each other. Everything starts from a young age. But unfortunately, today with the internet and fast slogans and very short attention, especially at the teenaging, the ability to really pour real information is very limited. But I think about what Menachem said, I absolutely agreed that it will be beneficial for the public if people will be more aware of what they are nurturing themselves and their body, and will be more respectful and will know how to be more respectful. So I'm a great believer that the solution should start with education.
Thank you. Please.
Okay, first of all, our opening position is not really good. The average Israeli throws about 3 kilograms of waste on a daily basis. The numbers in Europe are very similar, 2.5 to 3 kilograms per day of waste. Not all of that is food waste, of course, but not all of that is food waste. So, starting point is not that good. If I could cautiously think of a point of optimism is really, and that has to do with education, I guess, and Professor Wolf, you spoke about education from kindergarten age, which is probably where it should start. That's why we at Vertical Field also try to transmit our message to very young age kids so they know about the value. But I look at my kids compared to myself, and I see an improvement in the way they look at sustainable solutions, at the way they try to waste less. So maybe that's the beginning of a better start.
Thank you. Alon, please, a short comment because we're running out of time.
I wrote to myself 3 short comments. First is buy what you consume. Black Friday of food. Second is there is a trend now in Israel, I know around the world, about second-hand clothing. I'm not talking about second-hand food that you ate. That's another thing, but again, it's about not wasting the food. I know that in my family, there's a joke about my wife that every food that is left in the refrigerator for 3 days and it's not enough to create a dish ends up as a quiche. You mix it and you make it like something that we all eat. So yeah, don't spend, don't waste. I think that especially for the second generation of Holocaust survivors, this is something very strong. This is from our history. And the third thing is really cultural. It goes back to the Jewish tradition, because if you think about this, there's many, many jokes about this. In every holiday and event in Judaism starts and ends in food. Think about this. It's all about food. So it's education again. It's education.
Thank you very much. Menachem, last comment.
Yeah, I totally agree about the education. And as for culture, I just want to give you two examples, India and China. Okay? Two cultures. Let's say China 30 years ago were maybe similar to India, but look about the consumption now of milk and meat, and look about India. India, it's a miracle from agriculture point of view. I mean, they feed 1.4 billion people, and it seems like, and the key there is they don't eat so much meat. So, of course, culture can give you great examples here. How can we see ourselves in like 20, 30 years, and we have them already.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panel again, and now panel end. Thank you.